Shalom, friends. Welcome to this shiur in Talmud. We're studying Gemara today, Masechet Brachot, Tractate Blessings. I'm Eliyahu Shir, coming to you from Chesed Ve'emet. My website can be found on www.lovingkindness.co. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do click on the subscribe button and click on the bell button to be notified of future shiurim. This shiur is dedicated in the merit and for Refuah Shlema for Michael ben Rachel. It has been sponsored by a kind sponsor. May he have a Refuah Shlema amongst all the sick of the Jewish people at this point in time. And I also dedicate this shiur for an aliyas neshama for all the people who were niftar, who died in the tragedy of Meiron this past week on Lag BaOmer. May the words of our shiur today bring them an aliyah. May they be for words of comfort and kindness to their souls wherever they are and for their merit. We're studying from the Koren Talmud Bavli. It's a very beautiful edition, as you see in front of you. Please do follow along. You'll see the original writing in the middle, and you'll see some pictures on the side, diagrams, illustrations, photographs, a beautiful translation with notes to help us find our way around. I work usually by reading it myself and translating the words myself. And if there's anything else that I'm missing, please do follow along, and you can always hit the pause button and just look at the notes on the sides just to keep up with me. If I've missed something out, please do follow along in the notes, because they can surely only help us to learn the material even better, and it makes for easy learning and grasping the subject. So we're actually on page Chaf Daled Amud Base. We're right at the end of 24, side B. We're concluding a particular discussion. We've been discussing ideas of Shema, and we've been discussing ideas of the Amidah. We've been discussing ideas of some very physical disturbances during prayer. And our last discussion dealt with the issue of reciting the Keriat Shema in a place that is not clean. Now, what are the different opinions that we had, whether or not we could walk through an area which wasn't clean and still continue to recite the Keriat Shema, perhaps putting one's hands over one's mouth, or alternatively, perhaps stopping altogether. There were two main opinions, if you recall from last week, which we're going to revise. In fact, in the next Braita, immediately, the two opinions are brought down, that of Rav Huna and that of Rav Chisda. Rav Huna was in favor of the idea that if a person is walking through a dirty area, that he may put his hand in front of his mouth and he may continue to recite the Keriat Shema. Whereas Rav Chisda was totally against this, and he's basically holding that it's not correct to involve oneself in any type of Torah, words of purity, words of holiness, when one is surrounded by a dirty area. So we discussed the various opinions, and Rabbi Yochanan was called in to discuss the particular opinions as well, and that's what got the whole argument going. Tanya Kavase de Rav Huna, the Brisa says that it was taught just like Rav Huna said. Tanya Kavase de Rav Chisda, and it was also taught in a Braita just like Rav Chisda said. Now the Gemara's way is always in discussion to always express the idea of it's taught like this particular rabbi and it's taught like this particular rabbi, and then immediately to teach us what the teaching really is. Tanya Kavase de Rav Huna, it's taught in a Braisa just like him, like Rav Huna. Here is the story. HaMehalech b'mavos, a person who's walking through the passageways, through some alleyways, hamatunafot, which are dirty, filled with pollution. Maniach yado al piv, he should put his hands on his mouth, v'yikra Keriat Shema, and he reads the Keriat Shema. He's walking through the alleyways. It's dirty. There's garbage. Hasn't got a nice smell, perhaps. There's a gentle smell, perhaps, at some dirt. At least if he puts his hand on his mouth, perhaps just over his nose as well, he'll prevent himself from smelling the bad smell. So he may put his hands over his mouth and he recites the Keriat Shema. That was the Brisa taught in the name of Rav Huna. Tanya Kavase de Rav Chisda, it was also taught in another Braita, just like him, like Rav Chisda, who said what? He said the following: Hayam halech b'mavos, a person was walking through alleyways, hamatunafot, which were dirty, Lo yekra Kriyat Shema. See, the Brisa says it in both of their names. One Brisa says in the name of Rav Huna, the other Brisa says it in the name of Rav Chisda. According to Rav Chisda, as the Brisa teaches, Lo yekra Kriyat Shema. He may not recite the Kriyat Shema while he is walking through the alleyway, which is dirty. It has the garbage along the way. And then, of course, we had that big debate. Well, what should he do basically if he started the Kriyat Shema and then he walked through and he put his and he didn't and he stopped saying the Kriyat Shema and he gets to the other side? What's the din? Does he have to recite the Kriyat Shema from the beginning? May he continue from where he left off, etc.? V'lo od. Not only this, says the Gemara, ella, but rather she'im haya koreh uba, if he was he was busy reading, he was reading and coming along, which means to say that not only is it that he shouldn't have done it in the first instance, but if he got caught up in the middle, forsake. He should stop himself immediately and then continue his walk through the dirty area until he gets to the other side. Lo pasak mai. If he didn't stop, what's the din? What do we say about this individual? Carries on walking, carries on reciting the Kriyat Shema, walking through the dirty place. Omar Rabbi Meyasha bar Berei, the Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, said Rabbi Meyasha, the son of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, Alav HaKosov Omer, about him, the verse says, V'gam ani nasati lahem chukim lo tovim. Also I have given to them statutes, laws that are not good, or mishpatim, and judgments, lo yichyu bahem, that they shouldn't live with them. Which means to say, God is displeased with people who are not observant of an area which is dirty, that they should rather be in a clean place while they're reciting words of Torah, while they are davening. The verse is indicating God's displeasure that, what is this? Did I give them laws that are, as it says over here, that are not so great, and things that they shouldn't live by? It's not nice, it's not appropriate for the situation. Take a look at the personalities on the side. Who was Rabbi Meyasha that we're reading about over here? Son of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, based on his age and the sages with whom he associated. Apparently, Rabbi Meyasha was among the students of Rabbi Yochanan. However, he clearly learned most of his Torah from his grandfather, in whose name he often cites his teachings. Rabbi Meyasha, he did not live a long life, as he died during his grandfather's lifetime after a protracted illness. It is precisely the fact that so young a scholar was privileged to have halachic statements cited in his name in both the Babylonian and the Jerusalem Talmuds, as well as the Midrashic literature, that underscores his greatness. Okay, so the first thing we've learned about over here is that going through a dirty area and reciting Kriyat Shema is not something that's appropriate. The Torah frowns upon it. Rav Asi Omar, Rav Asi said, Hoi, moishkei avon b'chavlei hashav. Woe to those who draw sin, iniquity, with cords of vanity, which means to say, what are you up to doing? Rav Ada bar Ahava Omar Hacha. So Rav Ada, the son of Ahava, said this from here. He devar Hashem baza. For the word of Hashem he has despised. That's quite a strong statement, indicating that a person who goes ahead and he recites the Kriyat Shema as he goes to the dirty area, he's not acting appropriately to the words of Hashem. Words of Torah are something that are holy, should be recited in a place of holiness. Everything about ourselves should correspond. Everything should be in sync. If we're going to be reciting words of Torah, let us do it in a shul or in our home, where the area that we're in, of course, is clean. But it's a bit of a contradiction in terms that we're reciting words of Torah and Kedusha in a place that's dirty. It seems to be Ketevar Hashem Bazah. He's despised the word of Hashem. He doesn't mind dealing with holy words in a place of dirt. Ve'im pasak, says the Gemara, continuing, if he did interrupt, which means that he was reciting the Kriyat Shema, and then he got to the garbage, the trash, and it smelled bad, and he didn't even put his hand in front of his mouth. Rather, he stopped altogether. My secharo, what is his reward for doing such a thing? Omar Rabbi Abahu, says Rabbi Abahu, Allah v'kasuf omer, about him, the verse states, And through this thing, may your days be lengthened. Through this matter, that you will prolong your days. Meaning that being careful with one's speech, one merits longevity, which means to say, if we are careful that we don't recite these words in a place of garbage and trash, we regard them with holiness, then we say, through that, God rewards us with longevity. Omar Rav Huna, Rav Huna said, okay, we continue a new section now. So from here we've learned the importance that maybe we didn't really get to a final verdict in the matter. I mean, basically the idea is ultimately we should refrain from reciting words of Kedusha, reciting the Keriat Shema. When we go to that dirty area, maybe there are opinions that hold one could put one's hand in front of one's mouth, but ultimately the person who is going to refrain from it altogether is showing that he is very sensitive to the process that he's going through at this point in time, meaning he's going through a dirty area and he realizes it's just not appropriate. Could it be permissible? Maybe it's permissible, but it's not appropriate. Those who have joined our shiurim in the Mesilat Yesharim, in the path of the just, will know that while the first trait that we learn about is zehirut, which means to be careful, to refrain from things that are bad for us, the third trait that we move up on the ladder of holiness is known as nekios, which stands for or means cleanliness. Cleanliness is a level above zehirut. If zehirut refers to the idea of refraining from that's bad, nekios refers to the idea of not even associating with any possibility that could be on the side of bad. The same idea applies over here. You could say perhaps a person who would be on the level of zehirut might say, it's a pretty dirty area, I'll put my hand in front of my mouth when I pass by and continue saying the Keriat Shema. Is it allowed? Well, if it's allowed, I can do it. But the person who is naki, the person who is clean not in the sense of physically clean and not even in the sense of a spiritual clean, it has no translation. It refers to a great level of sensitivity whereby a person wishes to refrain from anything at all that even there's a tinge of it, it smacks of it. There's just the slightest trace of something that a person should refrain from. There are those people that say, I will refrain from it completely. Some people will say, if it's forbidden, I refrain. But if it's permissible, why can't I do it? But the Naki person says, even if it's permissible, if it's something that just doesn't feel right, it's just not quite right, there are opinions that might say it's not appropriate, I'll refrain from it altogether. And this is the idea. The reward is given to the person because he really values that even if it would be permissible to do, he's not going to do it. It's something that one runs away from. We continue the next section. Omar Rav Huna said, a person had his garment that was tied up to him on his loins, meaning on his hips. Mutar likros Keriat Shema. He may recite the Keriat Shema. What's the chidush over here? What are we talking about? What's the topic? We're speaking about the idea that the top part of his body is exposed and he wears a gartel of sorts, a belt of sorts, which then separates towards the bottom so that the heart will not see the nakedness. In other words, the two parts of the body have a concealment one to the other. Mutar likrot Keriat Shema. It's permissible to read, to recite the Keriat Shema. Tanya nami hachi. It's also taught over here. It says the following in another brighter. Here we see. What does it say? Hayata talito shall beged v'shel all v'shel sak. Chagura al musnav. A person had his garment. It was made of beged, type of material. What shall we call that? Cloth. Shel or, leather. V'shel sak, and of sackcloth. Chagura al matnav, and it was placed on his hips, in his waist. Mutar likro Keriat Shema. It's permissible to read the Keriat Shema. So the two brightest taught over here. First one said straightforward, he has his talis, his garment that was bound around him on his hips, around his waist. It's mutar and Tanya nami hachi. It's also taught over here in another brighter that it says same idea. Okay, here we see in the notes. Let's take a look. A garment of cloth, of leather, of sack. This list begins with an ordinary garment, moves on to leather, which is also appropriate, and ends with sackcloth, which is only barely considered suitable human clothing, in which nevertheless one is permitted to recite the Shema. We continue on to Daf Chaf Hey Amud Aleph, moving through successfully. Aval tefillah. But what about for prayer? Meaning for the Amidah? No. You have to cover your heart. The heart must be covered. Because in prayer, he addresses God directly, and he must dress accordingly. It's not appropriate to have just the waist that's covered, but the entire heart should be covered all together. For prayer, until he covers his heart. One who has a garment strapped around his waist, even if he covers his nakedness and serves as a barrier between his nakedness and his heart, it is prohibited from praying until he covers his entire body. If he failed to cover himself, or due to circumstances beyond his control, he had nothing with which to cover himself, and he nevertheless prayed, he fulfilled his obligation because his nakedness was covered. Okay, that's the b'diavad situation, second best, after the fact. If he didn't do it right this way, at least he still fulfilled his obligation, though it's certainly by no means ideal. Rav Huna also said another thing. We're learning some teachings from Rav Huna over here. A person forgot. Remember the story from before already? We've discussed the issue of tefillin in a bathroom. Now, this person forgot totally. And he entered into the bathroom with his tefillin on. He puts his hands upon the tefillin until he finishes what he has to do. Fascinating. We learned before in our Gemara that really a person shouldn't go into the bathroom with tefillin. What should he do? He should put the tefillin on the sides of the wall and in a public place where he can hide it somewhere or around the corner. We learned all sorts of different ideas what he should do. Another fellow walked into the bathroom and he's preparing to do what he has to do. And he realizes, hey, I've got my tefillin on. Let's not forget, as we said before in previous shiurim, the real halacha is to wear tefillin all day long. So it was quite likely that a person might totally forget. It might be during the day, and people are occupied with all sorts of activities. And of course, one shouldn't have his mind off the tefillin. But everybody knows that, especially if it's part of your daily garment that you're wearing it all day long, then you're liable to forget, hey, I'm wearing my tefillin. Hold on a second, I didn't take it off. So what should he do? He should put his hand upon the tefillin until he finishes what he has to do. Interesting. He's not supposed to walk into the bathroom altogether with his tefillin. And now the Gemara gives him permission to finish what he needs to do. The Gemara asks the question, until he finishes. Is that what you think? Is that what enters your mind? Until he finishes doing what he has to do, that's terrible. He's in the bathroom with his tefillin. He's not supposed to be there in the first instance. And now the Gemara gives him permission to even finish up what he's doing before he leaves. But rather, here's the answer. This is what Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said. It means until he finishes the first stand, or perhaps if we want to use a word which describes it clearer, the first stool, the discharge, or the first discharging the first mass of feces. The idea is, what happened to the person? He is now seated and he needs to do what he's doing. So here we're learning some great health principles. He could stop himself, of course, and he could just simply get out and take the tefillin off. But the Gemara says, no, he should finish doing what he has to do, at least, according to Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, until he finishes the first stool. And to stop, le'alta, shouldn't he perhaps stop immediately? Get out. Get out immediately. What are you doing? Stop for nothing. You just get out of there already. Mishum the Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, the answer is because of what Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel taught. The Tanya, it was taught in a brisa, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says the following: Amud achazer mevi es ha'adam lidei hidrokan. The first stool that the person passes will bring, in other words, if it goes backwards into his body, will bring a person to a particular health problem known as dropsy, hidrokan, dropsy. Silon hachozer. If, however, it is the first flow of urine that goes back, which means that he is beginning to urinate, and he pulls it back into him before the urine leaves the body. It will bring a person to jaundice. So we see over here that there are health issues involved as well, and the Torah gives us a leniency under these circumstances to be healthy. And if we find ourselves in the bathroom, we've got tefillin on, we should not stop and run out, because in fact we can be in a state of great danger to our health. Let's take a look at the note. One who forgot and entered the bathroom while donning phylacteries. One who forgot that his phylacteries were on his head and began to defecate, covers them with his hand until he has passed the first mass of feces, after which he must emerge and remove them before returning to the bathroom. He dons his phylacteries only after cleaning himself, and that's it. Okay, so this is quite an interesting halakha. We just see that the Gemara is sensitive to a human being's needs. Let us not forget, as I keep repeating, the Torah is given to us in this world over here. We are not angels. We do not have the laws of angels to be able to be perfect. We have physical bodies, and therefore we need to know the halachot that apply to our physical bodies and what to do under these circumstances. Very important, of course, to look after our health. Very important to be aware of the words of Torah that teach us the importance of looking after our health. Itmar, it was stated by an Amoira, Tsoa al Basaro. A person has dirt, feces on his flesh. Well, this is a big problem. We're not allowed to engage in holy activities if there is feces on our body. In those days, it was certainly more likely that this could take effect. There were no soft wipes that you could use in those days, and they would use, perhaps, as we've discussed before, stones or leaves, which could cut through the skin, and all sorts of things that were quite harsh. Now, as a result of doing that, it was easy for, of course, one to end up having some of the feces on one's hands or on one's body, anywhere. And today, perhaps it's less so. Those people who want to be absolutely cautious should be certain that they get themselves a bidet of sorts. You don't have to necessarily fit one in the bathroom completely, but certainly today they make these installable bidets that fit onto the toilet, and it is correct and appropriate to use it because it will clean the body absolutely completely, and will also protect the person from the sharpness of the toilet paper, etc., which can cause a person perhaps to stop, and as a result of that, he will have feces on his body. So just as a tip, it is quite important that where possible, if a person can afford it and it's easily available, one should certainly install a bidet. It is very healthy and keeps the body very clean. So, al basaro, a person has feces on his hand, or yado, or on his flesh, or on his hands. Munachat or yado munachas bebait hakisei, or his hands is placed into the toilet, which means to say the toilet, not the toilet bowl. His hand is placed in the toilet room, inside the bathroom. Two things. One, he either has the feces on his flesh, or two, he places his hand into the bathroom itself. Rav Huna said, Mutar likros Keriat Shema. Fascinating. He says it's permissible to read the Keriat Shema, even though a person has the feces on his flesh, or he puts his hands into the bathroom, which means a part of his body is in a place of impurity. That's what we're discussing. That's our topic that we're discussing. The impurity, the dirt, real physical impurity, physical dirt. Rav Chisda Omar. Yeah, the argument again between Rav Huna and Rav Chisda, another argument we discussed before when they're walking through a dirty area. Now we've taken it one step further. We're speaking about an actual bathroom. We're speaking about feces. We're speaking about putting one's hand into the bathroom. Rav Chisda said, Asur likrot Keriat Shema. It is forbidden to read Keriat Shema under such circumstances. A person has a small amount of dirt, meaning feces, on his body, and that can be in any part of his body. It can even be on the part of the body which is closest to the feces, which means to say it is not sufficient to say that since a person is standing up or sitting down and he's got undergarments on, and therefore nobody can see it, and therefore it's okay. It is forbidden to have feces on any part of the body when one is engaged in prayer and also in Torah study in general. Omar Rava said, and therefore, as I said before, it is for those who want to be extra careful, want to really fulfill this halacha, as we said in the Mesilat Yesharim, the attributes of Nikias, and this is literally Nikias, this is real cleanliness, really staying away from any possibility of dirt, really cleaning oneself, keeping one's body, the physical body, in a state of purity, so that when one addresses God, when one is involved in prayer and Torah study, one does so with as clean a body as possible. Omar Rava said, my time at the Rav Huna. Hold on a second. What is the reason of Rav Huna? Rav Huna says, Mutali Krot Keriat Shema. Because his reasoning is, Kol HaNeshama Tahalel Ka Haleluka. Every soul shall bless God, praise God. So what was Rav Huna talking about? Rav Huna is talking about the idea that when we pray to God, we pray through our souls. So who cares what's doing with the physical body? As long as the soul is clean, then everything is fine. And therefore, since the soul prays, it doesn't matter if there's dirt, feces on the body. It doesn't matter if one's hand is in the bathroom, because doesn't King David say the very last words of Tehillim, Kol HaNeshama Tahalel Yah, hallelujah. Every soul shall give praise to God. Praise be God. Okay. So we see over here, as long as the mouth with which one recites praise is in a place of purity, the location of the other limbs of his body is irrelevant. Let's take a look at this note over here. One who had fecal matter on his skin, with regard to one who has fecal matter on his skin and seeks to recite Shema, there is a dispute between the authorities. Some ruled that he is permitted to do so as per the opinion of Rav Huna, which is the Rif, the Rosh, and the Rabbi Yehoshua. And some ruled that is prohibited as per the opinion of Chisda, says the Rambam and the Or Zarua. Even those who ruled leniently only did so if the fecal matter was covered and gave off no foul odor. One should adopt the more stringent ruling in all but exigent circumstances. And therefore, of course, he's saying to us, one should certainly be very careful that there is no dirt on one's body, and one shouldn't put one's hand into the bathroom and pray Keriat Shema. Why somebody would do this, I have no idea. But if somebody did, it shouldn't be done. Rav Chisda Omar, and Rav Chisda said, as we see over here, Asulikros Keriat Shema, it's forbidden to read the Keriat Shema. My time at the Rav Chisda. What's the reason of Rav Chisda? Because it's written, Kol Atzmoisai Tormarna Hashem Mikamocha. All my bones shall say, Hashem, who is like you. Therefore, all the bones have to be in a state of cleanliness. Since this praise is undertaken with one's entire body, he may not recite Shema, even just one limb is not apparently clean. We continue. Itmar was stated by an Amira, Reach Ra Sheyesh Lo Ikar. If there is a bad smell that has some sort of tangibility to it, which means that it comes from a visible source. Rav Huna Amar, Rav Huna says, that means to say that we found ourselves in the presence of a bad smell, and if we look around, we can actually see that there is the source of that smell. Rav Huna Amar, Rav Huna said, Marchik Arba Amot, a person should distance himself 4 amos, 6 to 8 feet away, 2 meters approximately, away from this ikar, the source, v'karei Keriat Shema, and then he can read the Keriat Shema. V'Rav Chisda Omar, Rav Chisda said, Marchik arba amot mimakom shepasach hareach, a person should distance himself a distance of 4 amos away from where the smell has stopped, v'karei Keriat Shema, and he reads the Keriat Shema. So again, we have Rav Huna, we have Rav Chisda. Again, we see Rav Huna taking a more lenient opinion. You only have to distance yourself 4 amos. Rav Chisda, stringent opinion, 4 amos away from the bad smell, a foul odor that has a source. One who seeks to recite Shema must distance himself 4 cubits from the source of a foul odor. If he is still able to smell the odor, he must distance himself until he can no longer smell the foul odor, in accordance with the opinion of Rav Chisda, which is supported by the Breita. And we see over there the different opinions. Okay. Tanya Kavase de Rav Chisda. Back to our story. It was taught in the Brisa, just like him, like Rav Chisda. Lo yikra adam Keriat Shema. A person should not recite the Keriat Shema. Lo keneged soas adam, not opposite the feces of a human being. Velo keneged soas klavim. He may also not do so opposite the feces of dogs. Velo keneged soas chazirim, and not opposite the feces of pigs. All these categories are bad. How come? Because they have a bad smell. Human beings, dogs, and pigs all produce feces of a terrible smell. I would say that there are many animals that do. I think there are others as well. We don't go into depth about it, but many animals produce feces that don't have such a bad smell. But these three, for sure, according to the Gemara, all produce a very bad odor. Velo keneged soas tanagailim, also not opposite the feces of chickens. Velo keneged soas ashpa, and also not opposite the dirt of the garbage, of the trash, shereichara, in this case, sorry, that the dirt of the garbage has a bad smell. If the place where this occurred was at a distance, a height, away of 10 tefachim, tefach is the amount of space approximately of a person's hand. The 4 fingers on a person's hand from the one side to the other is approximately the distance of a tefach. If you're about 10 tefachim away, which roughly speaking could be just under a meter or approximately just about a meter, if you want to take a rough idea of 10 tefachim, say a meter. So you should be about a meter away, or it's lower than 10 tefachim, about a meter. A person may sit next to it on the side, the Keriat Shema, and he may recite the Keriat Shema. The im lav, if it is not that distance away from him, meaning above or below, he must distance himself to the degree of where his eyes can no longer see the dirt. And so to the same thing applies for prayer. If it's a bad smell, sheyesh lo ikar, and it has a source, it has some tangibility to it, means it has a source, you know where it's coming from. Markik arba amos mimkom hareyach. A person should distance himself 4 amos from the place of the smell. V'korei Keriat Shema, and then he may recite the Keriat Shema. Let's take a look at these notes here. Dog excrement, pig excrement. The excrement of dogs and pigs, if one used them in processing. Oh, sorry, we're not there yet. Let's just see. Yeah, sorry. So we got one more step to do. Omar Rava said, Leis hilchata, the halach is not in accordance. Ki hai masnisa, according to this teaching, b'chol hanei shematata, according to all of these halachas, ella ki ha detanya, but rather in accordance with what's taught in a Braita. What does it say? Lo yikra adam Keriat Shema, a person shouldn't recite the Keriat Shema. Lo keneged tzoas adam, not opposite the excrement of a person, human being. Velo keneged tzoas chazirim, not opposite the feces of pigs. Velo keneged tzoas kelavim, and not opposite the excrement of dogs. Bisman shenitan orot letochan, when a person places orot, skins, into them. What did he put the skins in for? He placed for tanning, and tanning is going to cause the smell of these things to come out very badly. But other materials do not defile the venue of prayer. Let's take a look at this: the dog excrement, pig excrement, the excrement of dogs and pigs. If one used them in processing animal skins, or if they give off a foul odor, one must distance himself from them as he does from human excrement. If not, it is unnecessary, as per the Braita cited by Rava. What is a foul-smelling dung heap? One is prohibited from reciting Shema opposite the foul-smelling dung heap. in accordance with the Breita, as you've learned about this before already. That was our discussion that we've been going through all this time, not to recite words of Torah, not to recite the Keriat Shema when one finds oneself passing through an area which has a bad smell. If the filth were in a place 10 handbreadths above, if the excrement was 10 handbreadths above or below the place where one was located, if it gave off no odor, according to the Tur, who disagrees with Rabbi Yehoshua, he is permitted to recite Shema there, as per the Breita. It's higher above him, it's lower. He doesn't really take notice of where it is. Some say that is permitted, even if it gave off a foul odor, as the 10 handbreadths are significant in terms of the odor as well. There are disputes with regard to other details as well. Some say that in addition to being 10 handbreadths above or below, it must rest on a surface that is 4 square handbreadths, which constitutes an independent domain. Others are regions in that regard. There is also a dispute whether or not he is permitted to recite Shema in a case where the excrement is visible. Some hold that he may do so only in a case where it is not visible. And the same is true of prayer. A place where one may not recite Shema, one is also prohibited from reciting the Amidah prayer. A foul odor that has no visible source, one who broke. Now we come to the next section. Itmar we come back to this one. Rav Sheshes, they asked of him from Rav Sheshes, Reyach Ra, a bad smell. She'ein lo ikar, and it has no tangibility to it. It has no source. Mahu, what is the din? So in other words, it's a bad smell in the air, but there is nothing that we can attribute it to because we can't see the source of where it's coming from. Amar lahu, so he said to them, Asu chazu hane tzifei devei Rav. Come and see those mats of the school of Rav. What is he talking about? He's talking about the students that would study in the Beis Midrash, and they would have mats where they would sleep. Dahane gondu v'hane garsi. Some people in the shul, they were lying down, or they were sleeping better. And some people were studying Torah. In those days, you could imagine. Even today, there are people that would do such things. You spend the whole day involved in Torah study and the whole night. And basically what happens is instead of living somewhere and then coming through to the Beis Midrash and studying, you basically live in the Beis Midrash. So there are the mats and you're busy sleeping. Some people sleeping, some people learning. Other people are then going to sleep and the other people are going to be learning. Well, once they're falling asleep, anything can happen. What does that mean? It means that some people, unfortunately, are going to pass wind while they're sleeping. And other people are going to be studying. V'hanei milei, and these words, b'divrei Torah. We're speaking about studying Torah. Aval b'Keriat Shema. If it comes to reciting the Keriat Shema, law, it's forbidden. In other words, when it comes to studying Torah, it seems that we are not as concerned with the reyach that has no ikar, but when it comes to Keriat Shema, it is not appropriate. B'divrei Torah, nami, lo amaran, ela techavrei. The Gemara says, even with regards to words of Torah, we don't say this, except when it is one's friend. If one's friend passed wind, then it is okay. Aval didei, but if it's him, law, it is not permitted. So we have an argument going on here. If it's him himself, he may not continue to study Torah. However, if it's his friend, it's okay. That's what the halacha says. Make of it whatever you want to. That is what the halacha says. So let's just take a look at this. And the same is true of prayer. We read that. Let's just read one more point here. Itmar, it's stated by an Amoira. So over it, if so that's the next section. Reyach ra she'ein lo ikar. One who broke wind and emitted a foul odor is prohibited from reciting Shema and studying Torah until the odor has dissipated. If the odor was emitted by another person, he is permitted to study Torah, but prohibited to recite Shema, in accordance with the opinion of Rav Sheshes. That was the opinion by the name of Rav Sheshes. That's exactly what we said. Okay, next section. Itmar was stated, Soa or Veret, if there was feces passing by. What does it mean? It means there was a wagon or something, and the feces was on the wagon passing by where a person happened to be standing. Maybe it could even be that a dog was passing by and the dog is not well and the feces is attached to the dog as the dog passes by. So it follows through while a person is standing somewhere. What is the din? Abaye Omar. Abaye said, Mutar likot Keriat Shema. It is permissible to read the Keriat Shema. Meaning if the dirt is passing by when one is standing in a particular position, not that he is passing by the area of the dirt, as we learned before. He walked through the alleyways and he went through garbage and the trash. Here it's the opposite. He is standing in a particular place and the dirt is passing by him. The smell is going to obviously pass by him. What is the din? Mutar likrot Keriat Shema, says Abaye, it is permissible to read the Keriat Shema. Rava Omar, Rava says, always the argument between Abaye and Rava. Rava says, Asur likrot Keriat Shema. It is forbidden to read the Keriat Shema. Now, when we speak about these ideas, of course, we need to know proof. It is not sufficient just to make up statements. You know, it's very easy to become a rabbi. Somebody asks you a question, you say, Mutar, it is permitted. Or somebody asks a question, you say, Asur, it is forbidden. That's even easier. When people ask questions to the rabbis, you want to become a great rabbi, all you have to do is just keep saying Asur. I mean, you can basically be right probably almost all the time, because if the person doesn't do the thing that they're worried about doing, probably they won't go wrong. They just say Asur, Asur, Asur. Well, that's not really how it all works, unfortunately. How it works is, in order for the rabbi to make a statement, it is mutar or it is asur, means he has to have a proof for it. So Abaya made a statement. He says it's permissible to say Keriat Shema. Was he just saying the statement because he says, I think it's okay? Or is there actually a reason as to why he said it? And Rava says asur, once again. It is highly unlikely that any of these rabbis are just saying statements for the sake of saying them, because they believe firmly in what it is that they're saying. Omar Abaye, Abaye said, Mena aminallah, from where can I say this? Where do I know this from, that I can say this particular halacha? Ditnan, because it is taught in a Mishnah. Hatame, somebody is impure, and he is standing underneath a tree. He is impure and he's underneath a tree. V'hatahor over, and the pure passes by him. Something that is pure passes by him. Tamei, it becomes impure. So he is impure. He is standing under a tree. Something passes by which is in a state of purity underneath the tree where this person is. Turns out that in the laws of ritual purity, the pure person becomes impure, which means he takes upon himself the characteristic trait of the one who is already underneath the tree. So Abaya was saying it is mutar to read the Keriat Shema when the impure thing passes by, because he is pure, and he's giving us an example by showing us the opposite. If something was impure and something pure passed by, the pure takes on the quality of the person that is there. Tahor omeid takata ilan, somebody is pure and he is standing underneath a tree. The tamei over, and the impurity passes by. Tahor, he remains pure. Let me just see that I said that correctly. That in a case where the ritually impure leper is standing under the branches of a tree and the ritually pure person passes under the branches of the same tree, the pure person is rendered impure as he passed by, as the entire area under the cover is impure. However, if the pure person is standing under the tree and the impure leper passes, he remains pure. Fine, I said it correctly. The im omad, however, if the impure person stands together with that pure person underneath the tree, tamei, he becomes impure himself, which means so long as the impurity is passing by, he still remains pure. But if the impure passes by and stands there, then the pure person also becomes impure. V'chein be'evin hamanugaas, and so too with regards to a stone which has been afflicted with biblical leprosy, in that if it is merely being moved from place to place, it does not cause impurity. The upshot is that impurity is only disseminated in all directions when the source of the impurity is stationary. And since the dirt is passing by the person, he may continue with his holy words, because we say that he is not going to be affected by the impure source that is passing by. Let's take a look at these notes out before we carry on. Feces passing by, if excrement or a pig, even if it emerged from a river, was passing before him, we're going to still see that. Okay, we'll see it in more detail. So even if it emerged from a river, was passing before him, one may not recite Shema. Some say that as long as it passes at a distance of 4 cubits, he may recite Shema. Ritual impurity passing, if there was ritual impurity imparted by a leper under a tree, and the ritually pure person passed under the tree, he becomes ritually impure. If a person was standing under a tree and the ritual impurity passed under that tree, he does not become ritually impure. If the ritual impurity came to a stop under the tree, he becomes ritually impure. Let's take a look at these notes here. Ritual impurity passing by. The laws concerning this type of ritual impurity are relevant to the impurity of the dead and the impurity of the leper as well. With regard to those impurities, in addition to being imparted by touch, it is also spread by means of a tent, i.e. a corpse or leper that is underneath an awning or a tent. The impurity fills that space. The related halachot are quite detailed in Tractate or Halot and elsewhere, and include the requirement that the impurity is stable. If the source of impurity is not standing in one place, it does not impart impurity of the tent. Now, these halachas, of course, are highly complicated, as we see the laws of ritual impurity. V'Rabba amar lach, and Rabba would say to you, meaning what? We have this argument between Abaye and Rava. Rava said that it's asur likrot Keriat Shema. It is forbidden. But Abaye gave a good logical reasoning from the laws of ritual impurity. But Rava doesn't obviously agree to those that particular logic, that particular savara. Therefore, if Rava says that it is forbidden, what is his reasoning? For Rava amar lach, Rava could say to you, meaning we didn't ask Rava his opinion, but if you were to ask Rava his opinion, he could certainly have answered this way. Hasam, there. In Aramaic, the taf is very often interchanged with the shin, so it's sham, hasham, sham, there. There, bikaviusa, talia milta. There, it is talking about the situation of the thing that is fixed, the permanence of the place. Diksiv, as it is written, Badad yeshev michutz lemachane moshavo, all by himself. He had to sit outside of the camp. That's where his dwelling place was. The leper sat all by himself in a place that was separated from everybody else. Hacha, here, v'haya machanecha kadosh, here your camp shall be holy. Amar Rachmana, that is what the Torah is speaking about. V'haleika, and here it is not. What is it talking about? Here, with regard to the obligation to distance oneself from something repulsive, the Torah stated the principle, and your camp shall be holy, and there is no holiness in those circumstances. Meaning, when a person is involved in Torah study, wherever he is should be a holy place. Therefore, you cannot use the same reasoning as the leper that Abaye used, because Abaye's reasoning speaks about our idea of where impurity is to be found. And then something passes by. What do we say? In our case, it's the opposite. We're speaking about a case of purity where impurity passes by, and we are worried that the place of purity should always remain pure without any impurity passing by. Therefore, don't use the logic of the impure in the same analogy towards the pure. And therefore, he says, therefore, it is not correct to recite the Keriat Shema when the impurity is passing by. Don't give me the logic of the leper who already finds himself in a place of impurity, because we find ourselves in a place of purity. Omar Rav Papa said, Pi Chazir, the mouth of the pig, Katsoa Overet Dame. It is to be compared, it is similar to feces, to excrement, passing by, Overet. It's passing by. What does that mean exactly? It means that the pig's mouth has a permanent status as being considered excrement. That's why we learned in the previous page over there about the idea of even if the pig came up from the river, it is still considered impure. He says, Pshita. Well, that's obvious. Obviously, if the mouth passes by, the pig's mouth is passing by, it's going to be dirty. Law, says the Gemara. No, tzricha. We need this analogy. We need this example. Why? Afal gav the salek minahara. Even when it comes out from the river, as we learned in the previous page. Even if a pig comes out of a river and it looks absolutely clean, nevertheless, the mouth of the pig is to be considered as permanently dirty. The mouth of the pig is constantly involved in dirty matters, and therefore, even though it goes into the river and comes out apparently clean, its very status is a status of dirtiness. Omar Rav Yehuda said, Safek tzoa, if a person's in doubt about there being feces, asura, it is forbidden. If a person is somewhere and he says, could be that there's some dirt around here, some feces, then it is forbidden for him to engage in his prayer. Safek mei raglayim, if he is in doubt whether or not there happens to be some urine present, mutarim, it is permitted for a person to pray over there. In other words, the Torah has a stringency towards tzoa and a leniency towards mei raglayim. Apparently, urine is not such a big deal. Urine is pure, and even if it has a slight smell, it is not on the level of feces, which is actual dirt and poison. Ikeda Amri, there are those that say, Omar Rav Yehuda, that Rav Yehuda said the following, meaning Rav Yehuda said this. But there are those that say Rav Yehuda said this. Safek tzoa, this was his teaching. If we find ourselves in a status of doubt with regards to feces, then the law is as follows. Babayis muteres. If it's in your house, it is permissible. Which means if you're in doubt whether or not there happens to be some tzoa in the house, it's still permissible. Ba'ashba, however, if you are amongst the trash and the garbage, asura, it's forbidden. Why is it different if you're in doubt? If you're in doubt about the one and you're in doubt about the other, they should be equally the same. The answer is simple. If a person is in doubt in his house, could be chances are there isn't. But if a person is in doubt in a dirty place altogether, the chances are more likely that there is. Safek meiraglayim, if a person is in doubt with regards to urine, even if a person finds himself in trash and garbage, also it is permissible. Because we are lenient with regards to the urine, with regard to the feces, we are more stringent. It's poison, it's dirt, it has a terrible smell. Here is the halakha. If there is uncertainty with regard to the presence of feces, if he is in the house, he may recite Shema. If he is in the dung heap, he may not recite Shema. If there is uncertainty with regards to the presence of urine, he may recite Shema everywhere, as the sages did not issue a decree in that case. Sevarla, he held, in logics, he held, Kihad Rav Huna, that like Rav Huna said, to Omar Rav Huna said the following: Lo asra Torah ele keneged amud bilvad. The Torah only forbade the situation when a person is directly in front of the stream of urine, in the amud, the flow, the stand of urine. That's the only real problem. Once you see it actually coming out, that's the problem. V'kid Rabbi Yonatan, and as it says about Rabbi Yonatan, the Rabbi Yonasan Rameh, Rabbi Yonasan raised a contradiction. Kesiv, it is written, V'yad tiyeh lecha michutz machane, v'yatzata sham chutz, and you shall have a place for yourself outside the camp, and you shall go over there. Okay? Ukesiv, and it's written, V'yased tiyeh lecha, and you shall have a spade. V'kisisa is seyasecha, and you shall cover your excrements. Here we see that the principle is, the Torah says when it comes to urine, in other words, you can just go and have a place that you need to go and urinate by. And it says over there, however, when you go to attend to number 2, then you must have a spade so that when you go out from the camp, you'll be able to cover your excrements wherever you happen to be. So we see that there's an obligation to cover the excrement, but it says over here, meaning that one must exit the camp before attending to his bodily needs, but there is no obligation to cover it. So that was the one point. The first point is saying there's no obligation, and the second point is saying that there is an obligation. How can this be? How do we resolve the dilemma? Kan be gedolim. Here is when you speak about gedolim, number 2, which means feces. Kan be ktanim. Here is when you speak about small things, meaning number 1, urinating. Alma, we see ketanim with regards to number 1, lo asra Torah, the Torah did not prohibit, ele keneged amud bilvat, only opposite the stream itself. Ha, nefula ara, but behold, that it falls onto the ground, once the urine falls onto the ground and is laying on the ground, being soaked up by the soil, share, it is permitted. V'rabanan hu digzarubahu, and it was really only the rabbis that made a decree about it, meaning that you shouldn't daven in the presence of the urine. V'ki gazrubahu rabanan, and when the rabbis made a decree, the vada'an, they were speaking about a situation that's really certain. Aval b'sveikan no gazur, but with regards to doubts, they did not decree. Let's just see if there's some notes here. No notes. Ubevada'an ad kama, and to what degree are we speaking about over here when we are certain? Omar Rav Yehuda, Omar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda said that Shmuel said, calls man shemat pichin, all the time that it is moist. If the urine is moist, then you need to worry about that urine. Otherwise, in other words, once it's been there for a certain period of time, it's going to get dry, and then you won't have to worry at all. But if it's moist, you've got to worry about it. V'chein Omar Rabbi Babachana, Omar Rabbi Yochanan, and so said Rabbi Babachana, he said that Rabbi Yochanan said, calls man shemat pichin, as long as it is moist. V'chein Omar Ula, and so too said Ula, calls man shemat pichin, as long as it is moist. Everybody agrees about that. Geniva, Mishmei the Rav Omar, Geniva in the name of Rav said, calls man sherishumam nikar, as long as the impression is still recognizable, it is still problematic. So that means to say, as long as there is some sort of an impression of the urine, it is still problematic. Continues the Gemara. Omar Rav Yosef said, Sharei lei marei ligniva. May the master forgive Geniva. That was his name. May the master forgive him for his statement that he just said. Hashda Tzoa. Now, over here, we're speaking about feces. Omar Rav Yehuda, Omar Rav Yehuda said that Rav said, Kevan shekarmu paneha, so long as the outside of the feces has already become solidified, forms a crust. Mutar, it is permitted. May raglayim, permitted of course to recite the Keriat Shema. That's what we're speaking about. That's our topic. May raglayim mibaya, do we need to have some requirements with regards to urine? Because Geniva said that Rav said, as long as there is an impression, it's still problematic. That's very strange. So he said back to him, Rav says, may God forgive you for saying such a statement. Why? Because if with regards to tzoa, with regards to the feces, there was a leniency. If the crust, it formed into a crust and was no longer discernible as the soft feces, then all the more so when we speak about the urine, if it had lost its impression, surely there would be no problem. Let's just take a look at Geniva and we'll end on that. Who was Geniva? Personalities. He was a member of the first and second generations of Amoraim in Babylonia. Geniva was one of the more colorful characteristics of the era, a sage of great stature. He was often visited in his home by the Amoira Rav, in whose name he cited many of his Torah statements. The second generation of Amoraim treated his teachings with respect, while Geniva was a wealthy and powerful man. At the same time, he was quarrelsome and contentious. Though the details of the incident are unclear, it is known that he had a serious dispute with the Exarch at the time, Mar Ukva, and it was only by virtue of Mar Ukva's moderation and judiciousness that the affair did not come before the Persian authorities. Ultimately, Geniva was charged with another offense, perhaps plotting against the crown, and was sentenced to death by the authorities. The sages of the following third generation cite his teachings, always appreciating his Torah while disapproving of his conduct. Background here, Sharei Lei Marei, may his master forgive him. Though this expression does not outwardly convey an element of condemnation, it still hints to the serious reprobation of a sage whose statements or actions are inappropriate. It has been said that when God's name is desecrated through a sage's actions, it is said of that sage, may his master forgive him. You must be careful if a person is a Torah scholar and he's issuing decrees and he's making statements. He has to be careful what he's saying so that he doesn't embarrass God, so to speak, that he makes up all sorts of things that at the end of the day, when you look at the situation, you say, is this really what God would want? Hold on a second, that doesn't sound right to me at all. There's too many proofs that go against your principal way of thinking. And that's embarrassing if a person doesn't think straight. One needs to think straight and follow in accordance with the studies, the teachings of the Torah. We're going to stop over here. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm Eliyahu Shir from Chesed Ve'emet, my website, www.lovingkindness.co. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do subscribe now. Click on the subscribe button and the bell button to be notified of future shiurim. Again, thank you very much to a kind sponsor who has offered assistance for the shiur in the merit for Refuah Shleima for Michael ben Rachel. May he have Refuah Shleima amongst all of the sick of the Jewish people, especially at this point in time after this great tragedy in Meron. And may it be favorable that the shiur that was given act towards the souls that are ascending above through this terrible tragedy, should receive an aliyah immediately and go up straight to the Gan Eden, to the highest levels of Gan Eden, through the tragic event that occurred. If you wish to be in touch with me personally, please do contact me via my website, by sending an email via the online form. And if you prefer to, please feel free to make a comment below in the comment section. If you've enjoyed the shiur, as always, I ask, please do like the shiur by clicking on the thumbs up button below, saying that you appreciate it. It really helps me a lot. It makes me feel like I've given something of myself, and it makes me feel that somebody else has learned something and grown in some way in Torah. So please do click on that like button. Please do share this shiur with family and friends who you feel may enjoy the shiur and get something out of it. We're trying as much as we can to reach out to others, spreading Torah, good values, beautiful values, and holy values, which is what the Torah is all about. For those of you who can, please do become members of Chesed Ve'emet by visiting the site and learning what it means to become a member, and offering a monthly donation to assist us to be able to continue with these shiurim, spend the time necessary to give over, prepare, and of course to answer emails of people who sent in questions. It gives us the time to be able to do this, and you take a great part in assisting us to be able to do that. And of course, I do thank those who do take part. You make a great difference to us. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to another shiur in the near future, and I wish you everything of the best. Take care of yourselves. Shalom, shalom. Bye-bye.